Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. Welcome to the LinkedIn Speaker Series. Whether you're in the room or on the stream, we're so excited to have you for our very first speaker series of 2018. I'm Rochelle Diamond. I'm on our employee experience team here at LinkedIn, and I run our speaker series, which is all about bringing inspiring ideas and innovative thinkers to our employees and our members to make them more productive and successful. And I always like to remind you that you can see all of our past inspiring, amazing speakers at speakers.linkedin.com. And we also have an iTunes podcast channel, so you can check it out there as well. So for our first speaker of the year, I can't think of anyone more appropriate to kick it off and make sure we're set up for success and a lot of joy in our new year. So Meng Tan is a retired jolly good fellow from Google, and that was his official title. It started off as somewhat of a joke, but when you meet him, you will see that it is so appropriate for him. He is a jolly good fellow. He was one of Google's early engineers. He helped build the first mobile search service. He worked on the search, or headed up the search quality team. He's done so many things at Google, but one of the main projects that he worked on, he's very famous for, is he created the, the mindfulness-based emotional intelligence program, Search Inside Yourself. Has anyone heard of that? All right, nice. And you may know, too, that it is also a book. We were lucky enough to have Meng about 4 years ago in our speaker series where he talked about that book at the time, and we're so happy to have him back. Meng has done so many amazing things in the world that I could really go on and on with lots of examples, but what I'll do instead is give you 3 fun tidbits / things that I love about Meng. So first of all, if you go to his website, he has a link for Meng's Wall. And he has a picture with literally every single famous person you can possibly imagine. Authors, heads of states, actresses, actors, I mean, you name it. I really think if you mention someone to him, chances are he has a picture with them. Just love that. He also, in his bio, he states that his hope is that every workplace become a drinking fountain of happiness and enlightenment. And he thinks that if something is no laughing matter, that's probably not worth doing. So you'll get a sense of his personality when you meet him. And then lastly, I just have to say on a personal note, whenever I have met with Meng, at the end, he will always ask, what can I do to best serve you? How can I help you? And I know he does that with everyone. He's so generous, authentic, and just such a light in this world. We're so excited and lucky to have him here. Today, he's going to talk to us about lessons from his new book, Joy on Demand. And without further ado, I'd love to welcome up Meng Tan.
Thank you.
Hello.
Can I start by bowing to the audience? Yes, I always do that. Thank you. Thank you.
Love that. Thank you. Thanks so much for coming. We're so happy to have you again.
Thanks for having me.
Yes. And we do have a LinkedIn tradition that I'd love to introduce to you here. When people come to LinkedIn, they share something that is not on their LinkedIn profile so we can get to know a little bit more about you, but beyond what would be on your profile.
Embarrassing stuff.
Are you open to sharing something? Okay.
Oh, so maybe a few things. First thing about me is I'm actually very good looking, but you cannot tell just by looking at me. but seriously, I think I may not put this on my LinkedIn profile yet. I'm executive producer of the recent movie called Walk With Me on Thich Nhat Hanh, which is a really cool movie. And then something embarrassing that is not on my on my LinkedIn profile. There was a time when I was captain of the school, of my school's captain of the soccer team for about 10 minutes. So what happened was, yeah, I mean they needed a new team like on the spot or something, and I was like a couple of us there. They said, "How about you? We can't play soccer," but we just did it, and I was captain, and I was captain for about 10 minutes, and then we lost like I think 8-0 in 10 minutes. So that wasn't on my.
You had probably had fun doing it. You probably were smiling and laughing along the way.
Yes, that's right. How do you guess?
Great. Well, thank you so much again for joining us, and I'll turn it over to you. Can't wait to hear more.
Thank you. Thank you. Let me start with water. So my friends, let me begin with my story. Once upon a time, there was a boy who was smart and happy. And when he grew up, when he was 21 years old, he has grown up to be a joyful, well-adjusted, confident young man. And that guy was not me. I don't know who he is. Definitely not me, because I was the exact opposite. I was miserable. I spent most of my young life in misery. How miserable? I spent a lot of my time and energy trying to figure out how to escape this misery. And one of the options on the table, very sadly, one of the options on the table always was ending my life. Because I end my life, I end my misery. I mean, I entertained that option for many years. It's kind of sad. And the way I experienced my misery was like this. If nothing was happening, I was miserable. And if something good, something pleasant happened to me, I was happy for a short amount of time, and then I returned to misery. And if something bad, of course, it gets worse. I was like, okay, ending my life. No. So that was how I experienced it. So I was 21 years old, and that was me. And then I fast forward a few years after that. I was the exact opposite person. My baseline has shifted from misery to jolliness. I was always happy. So if nothing was happening, I was happy. If something bad happened, I become like unhappy, and then after a while, I go back to my baseline for happiness. Something happened. So I saw my baseline shifted from misery to jolliness. So by the time I came to Google, I was the jolly good fellow because I was always happy. Right? So the question was, what changed? And so the first question before what changed was, why? Why was I so miserable before? And the truth is, I don't really know the answer. My best guess is it has to do with genetics. And there was a study that was published in 1996 that was like kind of discouraging, which was, so this is a study involving like a few thousand twins. And this study showed that the main determinant of your happiness in life is genetics, about 50%. They quantified it. So they looked at other factors, income level, education, socioeconomic status, religiosity, and a couple other things, marital status, and a couple other things. And none of these factors contributed more than 3% to happiness. By far, the number one determinant was genetics. And the title of the study is Happiness is a Stochastic Phenomenon. Stochastics means random, right? So pretty much, according to that research, your level of happiness is pretty much random, and worse, is determined randomly at the point of conception. When sperm meets egg, that's it. The rest of your life is cast and die. It's very depressing. But what the study didn't look at, did not investigate, is this question: what if you can train to become happy? What if happiness is a trainable phenomenon? So then the question is, why was that not in the study or not investigated in the study? And I think the answer is very clear. In 1996, and before that, it was not widely known that happiness is trainable. So I will compare it to a world. Let's imagine we live in a world where nobody knows anything about exercise. The idea of physical fitness not widely known, right? So if that is the world we live in, there will be a study that says fitness is a stochastic phenomenon, right? You're born with certain genes, and then you're either fit or you're unfit. Nothing you can do. Sorry. Some people are strong, some are not strong. Some people can run faster, some people run slower. Nothing you can do. But we are very lucky because since 1927 was the first year that exercise was studied as a subject of scientific inquiry. So by now we have 91 years of exercise physiology, of research in exercise physiology, and we all know that we can, through exercise, become physically fit or fitter than we are, right? Wherever we start from. So therefore, today, we all take for granted that we think of fitness as a trainable quality. We do not think of it as a stochastic phenomenon that you're stuck with, you're born with. So my great fortune was that at 21 years old, I, by accident, chanced upon this finding that it turns out happiness is a trainable quality. And it turns out that it's been known for a long time. It just wasn't popularly known, right? It's like a world where the Olympians, and then nobody else exercises, right? So the tradition has always been there, but it's not widely known and not widely practiced. So I chanced upon it. And the way I chanced upon it was I went to a talk by a Tibetan nun. Her name is Venerable Sangye Kadro. She's actually a white American. She came from LA. She became a Tibetan nun. She was a hippie, right? And of course, some large number of hippies became like monastics. And so she was one of them. So I was listening to a talk. And I remember in the middle of a talk, I don't remember anything she said. I remember the one sentence she said in the middle of a talk. And what she said was this. She says, it's all about cultivating the mind. And when I heard that, it's like suddenly my entire life made sense. Like suddenly everything in my life made sense. And I decided at that moment, I'm going to do this. I'm going to learn to cultivate my mind. I'm going to learn meditation. Right? I didn't know why. I mean, I had this strong idea that this is the solution to my suffering, to my misery. But I didn't really know why. But that was strong enough that I said, this is it. So the answer to the question, so by the way, when she was speaking, she was elevated on the stage. I was in the audience, so she was above me. So the answer to the question, what happened to me was none of the above. First joke of the day. So happiness is trainable. Question is, or the key question is how. And the way happiness is trainable is through training access to joy. And then, so okay, what does that mean? Right? So first, let me distinguish these two qualities. What is the difference between happiness and joy? So for happiness, I'm using the definition given by this guy called Matthew Ricard in French. Ricard. And for those who do not know him, by the way, how many of you have heard of this name, Matthew Ricard? Okay, good, about 1/3 of this audience. For those who don't know him, he's a Frenchman. After getting his PhD in molecular biology, he decided to become a monk. So he went to Nepal, and then he trained as a Buddhist monk for, I think by the time he was in the lab for 40,000 hours, so about 40 years. So he went to the lab, and it turns out that he could do amazing things with his brain, with his mind. Right? He could generate like insane amount of joy on demand, like in seconds. Yeah, blew my mind. And by the way, he insists, I mean, he's one of my friends, he insists that it's not because he's special, it's just because of the training. So he has a very nice definition of happiness. He defines happiness as, a deep sense of flourishing that arises from an exceptionally healthy mind. Not a mood, not a fleeting feeling, not an emotion, but an optimal state of being. So that's how we define happiness. So I'm using that definition. So in contrast, joy is moment-to-moment pleasant feeling. It's an emotion, happens in the moment. So the difference between the two is this, is that happiness is basically something you take, happens over time. Right? So for example, you say, I have a happy day, I have a happy life. So if you have a happy day, it doesn't mean that every moment is pleasant. Maybe some moments are unpleasant. For example, you drive here this morning, and the only parking lot has my name on it, like literally has my name on it. Not a problem for me, but probably a problem for you. So that's not happy. So, and a couple other annoyances like this. But taken as a whole, but at the end of the day, you look back at the day, and you have to come here to listen to me. But at the end of it, you look back and say, this is a happy day, right? And so when you have happiness is when you have moments of joy, but not every moment in the day is joyful, but enough moment of joy that when you look back and you aggregate that up, you have a happy day. So in that sense, joy is the building block of happiness. There is no such thing as joyless happiness. Therefore, the way to train happiness is to train access to joy. If you're able to access joy, then you can find for yourself the building blocks to happiness. And very fortunately, it turns out that access to joy is highly trainable. The key question again is how? And it turns out there are 3 easy steps to training joy, or training access to joy. I just want to make sure I didn't skip anything important. Okay. The first is easing into joy. Easing. So easing into joy begins with resting the mind, right? Putting the mind in a state of rest. And the idea is this. When the mind is at rest, is at ease, the mind at ease, when it's calm and clear, joy may arise. Right? In the calm and clear mind, there may be joy arising. And with enough practice, it becomes a reliable phenomenon, which is when the mind is at ease, joy will arise. And when the arising of joy, you use that to feed into more ease of mind. Because a joyful mind can be put at ease. And a mind at ease can bring up joy. And it becomes a virtuous circle. Shall we try an experiment? This is 5 seconds. Very fast. For 5 seconds, I want you to do this. I want you to bring total but gentle attention to the process of breathing. So bring your full attention to one in-breath and one out-breath. That is all. Sounds good? Okay, your one breath begins now. Thank you for your attention. So, show of hands. How many of you are calmer after the breath compared to before the breath? Good, almost everybody. You notice something. You notice that one breath is powerful. I mean, all you did was take one breath, 5 seconds. Already you feel calmer. Already there's an effect. And for those of you who didn't raise your hands, I think it's just some practice. Like maybe you take 2 or 3 more breaths. Yes, I know, 2 or 3 times worse than the control population. So the question is, why is one breath so powerful? Why does one breath already have impact? There are 2 reasons. There's a physiological reason and a psychological reason. The physiological reason is that when you bring attention to the breath, total and gentle attention, you notice something. You notice that your breath becomes longer and deeper, right? And then when that happens, what you're doing is stimulating your vagus nerve. And when you stimulate your vagus nerve, you are activating something called the relaxation response, which is the direct opposite of the stress response. So in that one breath already, your heart rate is beginning to go down, your blood pressures begin to go down, your body tensions are already beginning to loosen. And that's why the one breath already has an impact. So that's the physiological reason. The psychological reason is even more powerful, which is this, which is that to worry, you need to be in the future. To regret, you need to be in the past. And then when you bring total attention to one breath, what happens? You are bringing your full attention to the present. Therefore, you're not in the future or the past. Therefore, in the duration of one breath, you are free from worry and regret. Freedom from worry and regret is that powerful. Right? So by first estimation, looking at this crowd, I'm just guessing. By first estimation, about 100% of you are overachievers. I mean, Silicon Valley, and then it's LinkedIn, right? And if you're overachiever, and my guess is not just overachievers, some large percentage of you are in positions of responsibility. And therefore, I think all of you are carrying these burdens all day, every day, worry and regret. You're always carrying it. So the ability to, when you bring total attention to one breath, you're in the present, what are you doing? You are relieving yourself of the burden of worry and regret for the duration of one breath. But even the one breath, you are relieved. You're free. And of course, you pick it up later. I'm back to work. But however, if you can maintain this for more than one breath, 3 breaths, 15 seconds, 10 breaths, whatever amount of time, you have that freedom from worry and regret, and you get to heal, you get to recover. That's why it's so powerful. And it begins with one breath. By the way, don't underestimate how powerful this is. I mean, I've been doing this since I was 21, right? And then it turns out this is even more powerful than even I imagined. So I read a research on tennis players. So it turns out that the best tennis players in the world, like those who win the Grand Slams, they are distinguished from the average or the good, so the very best from merely the good ones, by a distinguishing skill, which is the very best tennis players in the world have the ability to rest body and mind between points. So between points, they are like 10 to 15 seconds. And the best of the best, they're able to basically do what you just did, but they master it so that their body and mind are rested. And then 10, 15 seconds later, they are more restful than they were before at the end of the point. And that's why they can sustain high performance for the whole game. That's why they win. Right? So this thing literally has game-changing consequences. And so I read that. I was like, okay, it sounds nice, but I haven't actually met a world-class tennis expert, so I couldn't verify it. And I was very lucky, I met this guy. His name is Novak. Some of you might have heard of him. For those of you who haven't heard of Novak, I don't know, only the best player in the history of the game or something. So I met Novak. I mean, we did our courtesy exchange, how are you, blah, blah, blah. And then after that, the first question I asked him was that question. So I told him what I just told you. And then the question I asked him, is it true? And Novak tells me, yes, it's true, but not only it's true. Novak says, he said, at my level, at my level, tennis is no longer a physical game. Tennis is a mental game. And the only way to come up on top is to be able to keep your mind calm and clear throughout the whole game. So it's that powerful. Don't underestimate this. And besides helping you become the top tennis player in the world, this skill that we just had a survey, a 5-second experience of, has profound implications for joy. So with this skill, calm the mind, right? Imagine you have a certain level of skillfulness, so you can do this on demand. Whatever's happening, calm, clear mind. And then in a calm, clear mind, joy arises. And there was a time, I found myself able to do this, like on demand. In 2 seconds, I sit down, 2 seconds, joy arises, reliably. So for me, about 98% of time. About 2%, sometimes I couldn't do it, don't know why, like bad day or something. But 98% of the time, I can do this. And even then, it didn't make sense to me, right? Even when I can do it, I said, why does this happen? Why is a calm and clear mind automatically joyful? Makes no sense. So I asked a few of my teachers, and one of them gave me a beautiful answer, which is that he says it's very simple. The default state of mind is joy. Therefore, when you bring the mind to a calm and clear state, all you do is return to default, and that's joy. There's no magic. Blew my mind, right? That was a life-changing insight, right? The key change here for me is that I spend my life thinking I need to pursue happiness. I mean, we all do, right? It's in the American Constitution, for heaven's sake. Pursuit of happiness. And yet, here's my finding. The finding is that happiness is already there, has always been there. It's not something I need to pursue. It's something I just need to allow. Right? Blew my mind. And later on, as I knew more about the subject, as I read more, I realized I had this analogy, which is there's a quality of mind, and there's a technical term in the Pali language, sukha. Sukha is defined in this context as non-energetic joy. So I compare it to the humming in the air conditioning in the room. The hum of the air condition, always been there, right? But you never hear it. The only time you hear it is when you quiet down and pay attention. These two things, quiet down, pay attention. So it's the same as sukha. Sukha is non-energetic joy. Because it's non-energetic, it has two qualities. The first quality is that it's subtle. Therefore, the only way to access it is quiet down, pay attention. Then it's there. And the second thing about sukha, because it's non-energetic, is that it's extremely sustainable because it doesn't require energy. So it's like once you listen to the sound of the air conditioning, you can do it all the time. You find that it's always been there, will always be there. Same thing with sukha. Once you're able to access it, you'll find that it's always been there, always will be there. And if you can do that, you have a sustainable source of joy to count on. And better still, this joy is independent of sensory and ego pleasure. So there are two sources of joy. One is sensory pleasure, right? You eat nice food, for example, beautiful sights and nice things to touch and so on. The other is ego pleasure, right? Somebody praises you before you come on stage, for example. Right? So they say, oh, I feel good about myself. Right? So these sorts of pleasures. The problem with these sources of pleasures, we habituate to them. Right? So it's like, okay, we get a promotion to, like, I don't know, director. Then we're happy for 3 days or 3 months, depending on who you are. And then 3 months later, they say, my life sucks, I'm not VP. Because you habituate to the new situation. So if you're chasing ego pleasure and sensory pleasure, you're always on the treadmill. You're always chasing the next high. But this joy, sukha, is independent of that. And you can have that joy, and independently, you can have this non-energetic joy you can always count on. And so because of that, for me, that was how I raised my happiness baseline, from misery to joyfulness, from this simple practice. Right? Very powerful. But there's only one, already life-changing, but there's 2 more. But wait, there's more. Call now. You get 2 more sources of joy for 1999. The second practice for learning to access joy is inclining the mind towards joy. Inclining the mind. So what does that mean? In the old scriptures, the inclination of mind is compared to the slope of a mountain. If the mountain is sloped in a certain direction, when water flows, the water flows effortlessly in that direction. Same with inclination of mind. Whatever your mind is inclined towards, experience flow effortlessly in that direction. For example, you're inclined towards anger, then every other thing makes you angry. Right? Effortlessly. Suddenly you're just angry. So, however, if your mind is inclined towards joy, then every other experience brings you joy, makes you joyful. So the key question here is, how do you change the inclination of mind so they can effortlessly experience joy day to day? And it turns out there's a very simple method, which is to notice thin slices of joy. So what does that mean? So assume I've been speaking for a while, half an hour, let's say. And then assume that I got water and then I drink water. That was great. That, my friends, was a thin slice of joy. It was thin in space and time. Thin in space as in it wasn't like, it was kind of nice, right? It was pleasant. Thin in time is like it didn't last for very long. It lasted maybe 2-3 seconds. I have 2-3 seconds of, that was nice. And this is a thin slice of joy. And these thin slices of joy, we miss them all. They happen all the time, and we miss all of them. Every time we drink a sip of water. When you go to the lunch, your first bite of the food, right? When you meet a new friend, right? When you meet an old friend, right? It's like those moments, every one of those moments, there's a thin slice of joy there, and we miss all of them. So the practice is simply this. The practice is simply to notice that they are happening. That is all. There's no real work. It's just noticing that they're there. So if you do that, what happens? So it's like playing a game, right? It's like, let's say we play a game where we try to count the number of blue cars on the street, and whoever counts the highest number wins. And by the way, you know what prize you win? So I was going to give you a bell, and then I tell myself, no bell, please. So we got a no bell, please prize. I told this joke when there was a Nobel Peace Prize winner in the audience, and she thought it was very funny. So besides winning a Nobel Peace Prize, if you do this, you notice something. You notice that the blue cars are in the streets all the time, but you never notice them. And if you play this game for a while, it starts to become a habit. You notice blue cars all the time, right? And it's the same with this practice. Notice all these thin slices of joy. And then after a while, you realize that they're everywhere. The whole day is filled with these thin slices. You never notice them. And straight away, something happens. Straight away, your happiness in life doubles. Nothing changed. Like the whole life situation, nothing changed. Eat the same food, go to the same place, do the same work. Yet, you're happier already. Why? For the simple reason that you're now noticing this joy. But more than that, something else happens, which is that if you do this a lot, noticing things such as joy, you begin to, something happens, familiarization. The mind becomes to familiarize with joy. When the mind familiarizes with joy, the word familiar is related to the word family. Right? So when the mind familiarizes with joy, joy becomes a member of family. Somebody you can count on. Somebody is there for you all the time. And that is how eventually you change the inclination of mind. And after doing this practice, and it's a very pleasant practice, all you do all day is noticing the good stuff. And through this, you change your inclination of mind so that effortlessly you're joyful. That's step 2. Step 3 is to uplift the mind with goodness. So what does that mean? Shall we do another experiment? Okay, you've done one experiment, you're all experts now, so now we're going to double the time. 10 seconds. For 10 seconds, I want you to do this. I want you to identify, secretly identify 2 human beings in this room, and then secretly think to yourself, I wish for that guy to be happy. I wish for that person to be happy. That's all, right? Don't do anything. Don't say anything. Don't go like, not HR safe. Yeah, HR will come after you. This is an entirely thinking exercise. Sounds easy? Okay, 10 seconds, begin now. Thank you for your attention. You notice that when you're doing this exercise, you're smiling. Right? You notice that to be on the giving end of a kind thought is intrinsically rewarding. By the way, this exercise you just did, there's a term for it, loving kindness. Loving kindness is defined as the wish for others to be happy. Right? To be on the giving end of kind thought makes you happy already. And you did nothing. All you did was think. Right? You didn't even do anything. So if that's true, if that's reliable, then, my friends, you just found an important source of happiness. All you do all day, just wish for others to be happy in your head, don't do anything, and already you're happier, much happier. So how powerful is this effect? So one time I was giving a talk on a Monday evening. It's Experience Rock, by the way. And so audience about this size. And then at the end of it, I assigned homework. And the homework is this. I say, okay, today is Monday evening, to try this. Tomorrow is a full day. Tuesday is a work day. So tomorrow, I say, every hour, on the hour, spend 10 seconds just secretly wishing for 2 people outside your office to be happy. Right? Because just thinking, it's not embarrassing. Unless you're like But if you're not doing that, you're just thinking, right? Not embarrassing. Go back to work after that. See what happens. So I assigned the homework. By the way, can I assign you the same homework? Okay. So I assigned this homework, and then on Wednesday morning, I received an email from a total stranger. And this person she said, I hate my job. I hate coming to work every single day. However, I did the homework on Tuesday, and Tuesday was my happiest day in 7 years. Happiest day in 7 years. What did it take? It took 80 seconds of thinking. And thinking is the easiest thing we can do, right? Every adult I've ever known knows how to bring up a thought. Everybody think of my elephant. See, it's that easy, right? And if all it takes is to bring up a thought for 80 seconds in the day, for the happiest day in 7 years, then this is a powerful source of happiness. So my friends, this practice is so important, like wishing for others to be happy. This practice is so important that if you only remember one thing from today, remember that you can get this book for $26.99. I'm just kidding. If you only remember one thing from today, remember this practice. And then try to do this. So that's it. That's my secret. Very simple. 3 easy steps to accessing joy. Easing into joy, inclining the mind towards joy, and then uplifting the mind with goodness. If you do this, what happens? 3 things happen. The first thing that happened is that, over time, the first thing that happened is that all the positive experiences become even more positive, right? For obvious reasons, because now you're paying attention. Like previously, you're just like, it's kind of good. But now it's like, oh, delicious, right? Nothing, again, takes no time, already double your happiness. So that's the first effect. The second effect is that neutral experiences become positive, right? Over time, more and more so. For example, there's one experience that used to be neutral to me, this one. And now it's a joyful experience. Why? Because we stopped taking them for granted. That's why. Right? I mean, all these things is that we take for granted, water, whatever. Having work, having food, right? Having clothing, having a shelter, but we take completely for granted. But when you do these practices, you start noticing thin slices of joy. After a while, you stop taking them for granted. After a while, they become joyful experiences. And then you develop a very important quality, gratefulness. You start to become grateful for everything. And you don't even have to do anything to be grateful. Like you just do this practice and naturally, gratefulness arises. And you become a grateful person, or maybe more than before, right? So, and then that becomes a source of happiness. And for me, the key thing that I became grateful of was to be free from pain. Right? So, how many people here do not have a toothache? I'm guessing everybody. Otherwise, you won't be here. How many of you did not notice that you didn't have a toothache until I asked you? Right? I think everybody, practically. You notice that right? When I had a toothache, I tell myself, if I don't have this pain, I'll be so happy. And then I went to the dentist, this pain went away, and 3 days' time, I forget to be happy. Right? It happens to all of us. We forget to be happy. Right? Freedom from pain is such a beautiful, powerful experience. And yet, we keep forgetting. This is so happy. And so through this practice, we begin to be more and more grateful for things like this, freedom from pain. Again, makes a huge difference in happiness. The third effect, I think even more powerful than the first two, is that pain, emotional pain, becomes manageable. Part of it is because all these techniques we just talked about, they are immediately applicable to pain. So for example, calming the mind. Like the painful, difficult situation, you calm the mind, half the problem gets solved. So that's one. But beyond that, something else happened. So for me, it was an experience where I thought I was going crazy. I thought I was going crazier than before. So I was going through a period of extended emotional pain. And then what happened was I discovered, to my surprise, that in the midst of long-term great pain, I'll find moments of joy at least once a day. At least 5 minutes at a time. So it's like, imagine this. Imagine that I was like, I want to die. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, I was unadulterated joy. I was just happy. for about 5 minutes. And then I want to die, I want to die. It's like, it makes no sense, right? So the question I ask myself, being an engineer, is that if the joy is so powerful, why doesn't it dissolve away the pain? Or vice versa. If the pain is so powerful, why doesn't it dissolve away the joy? And then later on, I learned that pain and joy are mutually insoluble. They can't exist side by side. And that is a very powerful finding. And the person I learned this most from is this woman called Rigoberta Menchú. She's a Nobel Peace Prize winner. She's one of my friends. And she's Mayan. She's the only Mayan ever to win a Nobel Peace Prize. And the thing about Rigoberta, if you have, some of you have a stereotype of Nobel Peace Prize winners. So this person win the Nobel Peace Prize, she must always be nice, right? Always happy, always warm and nice, warm to you and so on. And Rigoberta, when I first met her, I realized that she fit that stereotype to a T. She was that person. Right? She's nice to everybody. She's always warm and happy and give people hugs. Like we met her for the first time, she gave us a hug. She's that person. Amazing. And you spend 1 hour with her, already you can see something else. You can see that right below that joy is immense amount of pain. And she doesn't hide it. I mean, she's very honest about it. And there's genuine joy and genuine pain. And how much pain is there? So Rigoberta, her father was murdered, basically, burned alive by the government. Her mom was worse than that. Her mom was raped, murdered, beaten, murdered, tortured, and then left to the street after she died to feed the wild animals. And worse than that, they knew they were coming. They knew an enemy was coming. And the mom chose to stay and suffer all that. And then she lost her brother, similar way, she lost her son. So, and by the way, this is not uncommon. Right? People who win Nobel Peace Prizes, usually they go through trauma. That's how they win the Nobel Peace Prize. And they went through trauma, coming out on the other side as good people. Right? So they are amazing people. So for me, like any one of these life events is traumatic. It will scar me for life. And Rigoberta has more than one. And if you see her even today, right, she's like a wonderful, loving human being. She's still contributing to humanity. She's still attending conferences, she's still leading peace groups and so on. It's like there's no bitterness about her. It's amazing. How does she do it? And I realized that my finding, my experience was in her, multiplied by a couple of times. So what happened in Rigoberta is that she used her genuine joy as a container for her immense pain. And the way I see it is this. It's like, imagine if you break your leg, your bones are broken. What do? You put a cast around it. If you put a cast, what happens? Two things happen. The first thing it does is it prevents further damage. The second thing is it allows healing to occur. And for me, that's how I see Rigoberta use joy. Like she's using her joy to contain her pain so that it doesn't cause further damage, and she gets to heal over time. So the practices we do here, the joy practices, beyond making you happy, is profound consequences for life. Like how you lead your life and how you deal with pain. So that's it, very simple. Just to recap slightly, joy leads to, I need to leave time for questions. Joy leads to happiness. 3 steps to accessing joy. Everybody remember, easing, inclining, uplifting, and you do that, 3 things happen. Good becomes better, neutral becomes good, and painful becomes manageable. So I'm going to end this with a bit of a story. Well, not much of a story. So there's a story I tell in public a lot, which is that in 2003, I was taking a walk outside the Google campus, and there was a life-changing moment for me. Because as I was walking, suddenly I had a thought. It's like, I know what I want to do for the rest of my life. For the rest of my life, I want to create a condition for world peace in my lifetime. That's what I want to do. And everything else that happened in my life after that was determined by that one thought. Right? The Nobel Peace Prize nominations and whatever else. From that one thought. Create the conditions for world peace in my lifetime. So I tell this story, and then the question that nobody asks is what preceded that? What was the thought that came out before I just thought, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And the thought that preceded that was actually a discovery. It's that I suddenly realized something. I suddenly realized I was not in pain. I was not suffering. And then I realized, wait a minute. There was a time I was always miserable. And now I'm always happy. And then I knew what happened, right? The practices. And then I told myself, if I can do it, this guy, flawed, useless, stupid, this guy, if I can do this, anybody can do this, everybody can do this. And if everybody does this, then it creates the conditions for world peace because we all have peace, inner joy, compassion. They'll create a peaceful world. And that's how I decided this is it. This is the path of my life. So I hope this talk has been helpful to you. I hope these practices will be helpful to you. And I hope that together we create the conditions for world peace in our lifetimes. Thank you.
Well, we have time for some questions. You can line up at the mic if you have a question. I just got a question from someone in another office I'll kick off with. They were wondering, after that thought of creating the conditions for world peace, what are some of the things that have manifested from that?
So I'll tell you the first thing that manifested after that, right? So I had this thought, right? Create a condition for world peace in my lifetime. And then what happens? About 2 hours later, meh. I look at myself, I was like, who are you, man? Kidding me? You, world peace, hello? I mean, I also have some efforts in there, but I can't tell it because we're being recorded. And then a few days later, it came back. World peace in my lifetime. That's what I want to do. And 2 hours after that, like, you kidding me? And it just kept coming back. And after a while, I realized this is it. This is for real. And then that set me on my path. So after that, everything that manifested, to me, they are like miracles. Yeah, right? So I tell you one of the first things I manifested. First thing was, all these practices I talked about, they're all ancient practices in the ancient texts, and I learned them mostly from Buddhist monks, right, unfortunately. But I was like, this is not right. It cannot just be for the Buddhists. It has to be for all humanity, whatever your beliefs or non-beliefs, whatever you don't believe. So therefore, they have to be made scientific. They have to be data-driven, evidence-driven. So I did this manifesto. I wrote this manifesto in my email that we had to create a situation where these practices are secularized and data-driven and based on science. Then we can bring it to the world. And I sent it to a few of my friends, the Zen teachers and whatever, and the response was the same. Meh. And there was one person I met, I think that week or something. His name is Tenzin Tetong. He used to be Prime Minister of the Tibetan government. And he sent it to a friend, Alan Wallace. And Alan replied to me straight away. And he said, I've been doing precisely that for 6 years because the Dalai Lama told me to. I said, holy. Me and the Dalai Lama. I guess we can't both be wrong at the same time, right? So that was my first miracle. Right? And then through that connection, I got to basically to meet all the greats in the field. Right? I met John Kabat-Zinn, Matthew Ricard, and so they all became my friends. And then next thing I did was I led the creation of this thing called Search Inside Yourself. And again, it's a miracle. It's like there's no way to make this happen. Right? I was an engineer, some guy engineer, and I was like, this is way beyond my comfort zone. Right? Emotional intelligence, like. Kidding me? Engineer? Worse still, Asian engineer. Worse still, male Asian engineer. Emotional intelligence, like really? But so it's beyond my comfort zone. But the fact that it happened was a miracle. And then the timing was a miracle, right? Like Google University was just started at that time, and they needed a class, and they wanted something that was homegrown. And I did it without telling any of my bosses. And then I just, by the way, guess what I done? I just created this class, and everything just worked out. So it's gone way better than I thought it would. The book my first book sold 250,000 copies or something. The organization, Search Inside Yourself Leadership Institute, silly. We have, I think, reached like many tens of thousands of people. I don't remember how many. So, and we have 8 nominations for Nobel Peace Prize. By the way, I can tell us a joke. There's a reason I haven't gone to Disneyland for a long time. because I wanted to wait until we actually win the Nobel Peace Prize. So if the reporter asked me, so now that you won a Nobel Peace Prize, what are you going to do? And I'll say, I'm going to Disneyland. So I'm waiting for that. Thank you. Yes, sir.
So I have a question about the search for joy.
Yes.
Okay, so what would you say, hypothetically, if somebody found joy and they were very content,
Yes.
right? But then they're like, well, okay, now I found joy. They're not as motivated to push themselves to grow and things like that, So like, how do you balance, contentment versus growth?
This is actually, there's a one-word solution. I'll give you a punchline first. Right? The one-word solution is compassion. But this phenomenon actually is not new. You see this actually a lot in our group. The people who have deep practices, there's a word for it, Zen bums. So the people who had a practice so that they're like, when they're sitting, they have so much joy that they're happier than anything else they do, and they don't do anything else. They sit all day. Right? Not very good, in my opinion. So what's the solution? The standard solution is compassion. So to these people, the prescription to them from their masters is this, is that you are happy. However, all those people are suffering. They need you. You have to go help them because you have found it. Right? So in our case, right, the practice, we motivate ourselves with compassion. And so I'm happy, I'm content. However, I need to serve. There's a world that needs to be served. And so the growth and the work is towards serving the world. So yeah, so that's basically the answer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, thanks very much for all your insights. I found it fascinating at the beginning when you compared in the 1920s the studies done on exercise to now where we're at with joy and happiness. Can you share where you think we are on the spectrum?
So actually the story is actually even worse than I thought. So what happened was this, 1927, there was a group of scientists, they had this idea to study exercise. And it turns out they have an ulterior motive. Right? It turns out all those scientists, they are all themselves, they're athletes. And they know that exercise is good for the body. And they know that if we spread this worldwide, it's good for the world. But they needed the proof. Right? So that's why this bunch of scientists said, let's do this together in Harvard. And then they couldn't find any funding. Right? Because why? Because it's stupid, right? Like, why would respectable scientists want to study something as silly as exercise? Makes no sense. So the only funding they could get was from the army, for obvious reasons. And they could not do this in medical school because it was silly. So they did it in business school, which is more adventurous than medical school. Right? I mean, today we look back and say, really? But that was the situation, because it was weird, it was out there. And then it turns out it's even more out there than I thought it was. So I saw a newspaper article from the 1950s about a new fad, which is a very strange fad. And the fad is respectable business leader exercising. It's like what is like the company's CEO running from point A to point B and back, right? What a strange fad. So looking at that, from 27 to 50, about 30 years, and then from there to here, right, about half a century. So, but in our situation, it's been way accelerated. And I don't exactly know why. I think the world is different. So we're accelerated to the point where when I started in 06-ish, when I started doing this, it was weird. Right? And the only reason I could do this was because I was at Google. And Google was like adventurous. Like they were willing to tolerate weird people like me and weird ideas. Right? And by the time the book came out, so the book came out, my first book came out in 2012. It was on the front page of the New York Times, on the business section. And then a year or two after that, Kermit the Frog was doing yoga and meditation. Kermit the Frog. You cannot get more mainstream in America than Kermit. And everybody got the joke, right? Because the episode was Kermit was in California and doing that thing. Yeah, everybody got a joke. Everybody know what meditation is. So it's all accelerated. So then the prognosis, where next? So there was a time, so the question is, where is the critical mass? So what does that mean? There was a time when there were enough business leaders exercising. So it turns out exercise was a competitive advantage at work. Right? If you exercise, you're more likely to succeed for the reasons that are obvious to us now. So therefore, there was a time where there are enough business leaders to exercise. The next generation, all the young people, look up at Mr. Jones and say, Mr. Jones, what is your secret? And Mr. Jones says, because I exercise, I go to the gym. And the kids say, I want to be like Mr. Jones when I grow up. So all those kids exercise, right? So, and that's why you have the situation today. We all take it for granted. So the question is, when would we reach that point where enough people meditating for the next generation to say, I want to be like that when I grow up, therefore I want to meditate. And my guess is we are already there. We are maybe one generation away, or we're there already. So within my lifetime, probably in the next 10 years, we will reach a place where all these things are like more or less taken for granted. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, sir.
I'll assume they were applauding for you.
I assume it's because of my good looks.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I was struck when we were doing the initial experiment in breathing. You said after that bringing the mind to rest, sort of a shortcut to joy. And I was struck by the thought that many technology products seek to capture the attention, activate the mind, keep the attention there, focused on external things. So my question, I guess it's 1 and 1B. The question is a technology product that seeks to capture and attention and activate the mind, does it work in some sense antithetically to the process of cultivating joy? And if it does, is there an ethical or a moral dimension to making money from that?
I thought about this issue. I think in the big picture, right? It's like if you look at the world today and the world we were like 20 years ago, whatever. What has technology brought us? And in my estimation, and you could disagree with me, but in my estimation, every single thing has improved except one. So I mean, we all have better access to information and blah blah blah. One thing got worse, and the one thing is attention. And it turns out there's a very obvious reason. Because the currency of information is attention. To consume information, you need to pay attention. Therefore, the overabundance of information leads necessarily to the poverty of attention. Therefore, this is the problem. Right? And you're right, I do agree with you. And it's backed up by research. There was a study done, I think in Harvard, by Gilbert. It's a famous study where I don't remember exactly what they track people, and the key finding is that you're least happy when you're distracted. You're happiest when you're focused, right? And the amount of time you're focused in general is very small. It's fairly small, right? So therefore, I think the premise is right, that anything that increases distractibility will increase unhappiness in the world and vice versa. So what's the solution? To an extent, I don't know, but I have an idea. I think that this part of the solution could be the whole solution, but at least part of it is insight into what I just said, that information is a currency, attention is a currency of information, right? To consume information, you need to pay attention. That's a really important insight. It's important why? Because if we don't have that insight, we think of information as being free. But if you have insight, you say, wait a minute, we're paying a price, a very heavy price. The price we're paying is attention and happiness. And so as an analogy, junk food. I consume a lot of junk food, or I used to. And the reason I did it was because I can. So I can, so I eat a lot. And then after a while, I stopped eating so much junk food. Why? Because I was getting fat and unhealthy. And I don't want to be fat and healthy. I want to look good. So being aware of the price I'm paying makes me eat less junk food. I think today I eat very little junk food. So therefore, we have to bring up consciousness into the price of junk information. And I think that could solve the problem. But how to do that, I haven't figured out yet.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is that the last question, Michelle, by the way? One more, okay. Last question.
Okay. So this is from San Francisco. As a parent, my biggest hope is to raise 3 happy girls who have compassion and gratuity. What advice would you give parents to help them share a mindfulness practice with their children?
You're not going to like my first answer. My first answer is you cannot. I'm a parent, and my experience, I could be unique, but I don't think so. It's like whatever you tell your kids to do, they won't do it. Especially teenagers. So if you tell them you have to meditate, you have to do this, you have to do that, the more likely they will not do it. So that's the first bad news, but there's a good news. I think that, in my opinion, the only real way to do it is by example. And so the very first thing, in my opinion, and it's in general, not just for this question, but in general, the most important thing is to pay attention to your kids. Why? Same thing. The most important gift, the most valuable gift you can give to any human being is attention. Right? When the moment you're giving full attention to a human being, for that one moment, this human being is the only thing in the world. It's the only thing in the world, nothing else. Is there anything more valuable than that in the world? There's nothing. So therefore, my first suggestion to all parents, give full attention to your kids at least once a day, as much as you can. So that's one, right? And practice it yourself. Practice the meditations, the inner joy, the sitting, the loving kindness, and not just to people you love, right? But also in general, right? And those situations come out, right? If you're nice to somebody, your kids will say, "Why are you nice to the janitor?" Well, because it's part of being human, right? And the kids, okay. I mean, after a while, they get it. You don't tell them to do it, but they get it. So this is the only way. So through example. With that, my friends, thank you all for being here, and good.
Thank you so much, Meng.
Thank
you. I think we can all agree that we had an hour of many slices of joy. It was a big, thick slice of joy today. So thank you so much for coming. And if you're in the room today, he will be sticking around to take pictures and sign books. To everyone that joined us on the stream, thanks for joining us, and have a great day, everyone. Thank you.